The night Emily Carver first met Nathan Cole, Maple Hollow's sleepy air seemed to shimmer. She wasn't supposed to be there. A small-town seamstress in a borrowed dress. But fate had its own cruel sense of humor. Nathan's voice sliced through the crowd like silk, his charm magnetic. To everyone else, he looked like a man in control. To Emily, he looked like a miracle. How does a dream start looking so much like a warning? How does someone fall for danger disguised as destiny? When Nathan took her hand beneath the golden lights, Emily's world tilted forever. And no one would know that her first dance was also her first step toward a grave she would never see coming. The next morning, Emily replayed every word Nathan said. His voice echoed like a promise. She stitched fabric while humming, her imagination running wild. A wedding, a future, a fairy tale life far from her tiny studio. But fairy tales are cruel in how they disguise the monsters. Nathan texted her that afternoon. "You looked like royalty last night." Her heart fluttered. She didn't see how quickly admiration would turn to possession. How every word he spoke would one day weigh like chains instead of love. Within weeks, Nathan's presence became constant. He brought flowers, gifts, and opinions. Endless opinions. "That color doesn't suit you. You don't need to work so hard. Let me handle things." Emily smiled through it all, believing control was care. Her mother, Margaret, warned her gently, but Emily called it love. Love that filled her studio. Love that rewrote her boundaries. Love that would someday silence her forever. By their third month, Nathan proposed in the same park where they first danced. Cameras clicked, friends cheered, and Emily cried from joy. Yet, in those photos, there was something odd. The way Nathan's arm circled her waist too tightly. The way his smile didn't reach his eyes. Everyone saw a love story. Only later would they realize they were watching the beginning of a cage closing. The engagement became the town's fairy tale. Everyone adored Nathan, the successful businessman, the perfect fiancé. But Claire saw it differently. Emily was smiling too hard, laughing too fast. And one night, when Emily whispered, "He says he wants me to be perfect," Claire felt a coldness she couldn't explain. No one ever knows the first sign of a tragedy. It always hides beneath the sound of applause. The wedding planning began like a dream. Emily's studio overflowed with satin, lace, and laughter. She traced her future in thread and silk, sewing hope into every seam. Nathan wanted everything grand. The dress, the venue, the guests. But as his ideas grew larger, Emily's choices grew smaller. He called it helping. She called it love. The more she tried to please him, the less she recognized her own reflection. Somewhere between his praise and his rules, Emily's dream started belonging to him instead. Each week, Nathan's instructions became more exact. The dress must have pearls, the hem must shimmer, the neckline must flatter his taste. Emily laughed it off, telling herself it was love's excitement. But every suggestion came with a glance that warned her not to disagree. When she worked late, Nathan appeared suddenly. No knock, no call. Standing in the doorway like a shadow that refused to leave. Claire began visiting more often. She noticed how Emily's sketches had changed. Less color, less joy. The girl who once designed dresses with laughter now stitched in silence. When Claire asked if she was happy, Emily smiled too quickly and said, "Of course. He just wants everything perfect. But perfection has a price." And the thread that bound Emily's dream dress was tightening around her throat. The day Nathan took over the wedding planner's job, Emily knew something had changed. He canceled vendors, deleted emails, and told her not to worry her pretty head. That night, when she tried to protest, He kissed her forehead and said, "You'll thank me later." His affection felt colder than winter glass. Love, she realized, wasn't supposed to sound like control dressed as care. Weeks before the wedding, Emily sat alone in her studio, finishing the final embroidery. Outside, the rain drummed like a heartbeat. She whispered to herself that she was happy, but the words didn't sound true anymore. In her reflection, she saw not a bride, but a stranger wrapped in white. Behind her, the door creaked. Nathan's reflection appeared beside hers. His smile too calm, too certain. "Almost ready?" he asked softly. And she nodded, even though she'd never been further from ready in her life. It started with little things. The phone that Emily couldn't touch. The friends she couldn't call. The moments, Nathan said, were for her own good. At first, she ignored the pit in her stomach. Love made you trust, right? But one night, when she reached for his phone to show him a photo of their venue, his reaction sliced through her calm. He grabbed it too fast, eyes flashing something darker than anger. Fear. "Don't go through my things," he snapped, then softened his tone with a kiss. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Somewhere in the glow of her sewing lamp, she began to wonder who Nathan really was. Days later, Claire arrived at the studio with news that chilled the air. She'd found an article. Nathan's ex-fiancée, a woman named Sophie Lane, vanished 3 years ago. Same city, same promises. Emily's hands trembled as she held the photo. Sophie's face was radiant, familiar. It was the same pose, the same dress style Nathan had requested for her. For a second, Emily couldn't breathe. Claire whispered, "This isn't love. This is control." But Emily couldn't imagine a world without him, not yet. Fear had already become her routine. That night, Emily confronted Nathan. The storm outside matched the one in her chest. He denied everything at first. The missing woman, the lies, the past. But when she mentioned Sophie's name, his jaw tightened. "She left," he said coldly. "Just like everyone else who didn't appreciate me." His words were ice, his eyes hollow. Emily backed away, realizing for the first time that love could look like danger wrapped in devotion. The next morning, Nathan was apologetic, almost desperate. He brought roses, breakfast, promises. "I just get scared of losing you," he whispered. For a moment, Emily wanted to believe him again. The scent of roses filled her studio, masking the rot of fear beneath. But when she opened her sketchbook, she noticed something new. Pages torn out. The designs she drew the night before, gone. Nathan smiled when she looked up. "I threw them away. They didn't fit you anymore." That was when she realized he wasn't building a life with her. He was rewriting her into someone else entirely. By the end of that week, Emily had stopped answering Claire's calls. Her mother's messages went unread. Nathan had convinced her to move her things to his house for safety. The studio stood empty, dust collecting on unfinished lace. That same night, Claire drove past Nathan's home. Through the window, she saw Emily sitting still, her dress glowing white under the chandelier. The picture of obedience. Claire knew then something was terribly wrong. You can't save someone who doesn't know they're drowning. 3 days before the wedding, the town buzzed with excitement. Emily's gown hung from the ceiling of her studio, pearls glinting like captured stars. She told her mother she'd do one last fitting that night. "Then I'll finally rest," she said with a tired smile. But Margaret noticed the tremor in her daughter's voice. That night, Emily didn't go home. The light in her studio stayed on until dawn, then vanished. The small town that had waited for a fairy tale woke to whispers of a missing bride. By morning, the news spread faster than the sun. Nathan told police Emily had left after a small argument. He appeared calm, composed. a grieving fiancé searching for his runaway bride. But Claire didn't buy a word. She showed up at the station waving Emily's last voice message. Her voice cracked as she played it. "If anything happens, don't believe him. Please, Claire." The room fell silent. Even Detective Hale felt a chill. Detective Hale began digging. Emily's car was found near her studio. Keys in the ignition. Phone missing. Inside the studio, one detail froze him. A spool of red thread unspooled across the floor, leading to a torn piece of lace. The wedding gown was gone. Hale stared at the thread like it was a map, each loop spelling the same question over and over. What kind of love ends in silence and blood? When detectives searched Nathan's property, he guided them through with the confidence of innocence. "I'd never hurt her," he repeated. Voice steady, too steady. But Hale noticed the scratches on his wrist, the soil on his shoes. Out by the garden shed, the air smelled faintly of bleach. Dogs barked and stopped abruptly near the edge of the woods. Hale's gut twisted. It was always the ones who seemed calmest who hid the most. That night, a storm rolled through Maple Hollow. Claire sat by her window, staring at the lightning splitting the sky. She kept replaying Emily's last words, her voice soft and terrified. "Don't believe him." Then, through the thunder, she realized something chilling. Emily's unfinished veil was still in Claire's car. Her friend had brought it to her days earlier, saying she didn't trust it being alone with him. Claire clutched the fabric, rain streaking down the glass. Somewhere out there, Emily's fairy tale had ended. But Claire swore it wouldn't end quietly. The search began at dawn. Volunteers, officers, and townsfolk combed through fields, calling Emily's name until their voices cracked. Nathan led the effort, giving orders like a grieving leader. Cameras loved him, the perfect fiancé in pain. But Detective Hale watched closer. Every time Nathan thought no one was looking, his face dropped, blank and calculating. Hale had seen that mask before. Guilt wrapped in charm. Somewhere between the camera flashes and the whispers of rain-soaked grass, Hale knew the truth wasn't buried too deep. Back at the station, Hale replayed Nathan's interviews, watching every flicker of emotion. When asked about the night Emily vanished, Nathan hesitated. Once, barely a second, but enough. Hale's instincts screamed louder than evidence. Meanwhile, Claire sat across the room, clutching Emily's sketchbook. "She wrote this the day before she disappeared," she said softly. Hale opened it and found a single unfinished drawing, a wedding dress. But it wasn't white. It was black. Beneath it, Emily had written, "If he can't have perfection, he'll bury it." The breakthrough came when Hale's team examined Nathan's property records. 2 weeks before Emily vanished, Nathan rented industrial equipment, a cement mixer, and a storage unit miles outside town. Hale's pulse quickened. He was preparing, he muttered. The next day, officers searched the storage site. Inside, they found traces of lace and soil packed beneath the floorboards. Hale closed his eyes. "She didn't run," he whispered. "She was hidden." Nathan's confidence began to crumble. Hale arrived at his boutique unannounced. "Funny thing about lies," Hale said quietly. "They stain easier than blood." Nathan smirked, but his hands shook. When Hale asked to see the boutique's basement, Nathan froze. Moments later, officers uncovered more. Emily's engagement ring tucked behind a display of silk ribbons. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan finally whispered, "You don't understand. She was supposed to be perfect." By nightfall, the warrant was signed. Police cars surrounded Nathan's estate as Hale led the team toward the woods. The air smelled of damp earth and old secrets. When the dogs began to bark, Hale followed their trail to the back garden. Under a patch of freshly turned soil, something glinted. A pearl from a torn sleeve. Hale's chest tightened. "She's here," he said, voice breaking through the radio static. The fairy tale was over. What they unearthed that night would turn the entire town into mourners. The morning after her body was found, the sky hung low over Maple Hollow. Reporters swarmed the town square, hungry for tragedy. Detective Hale stood by the forensics tent, silent as the world snapped photos of the soil that once held a dream. Emily had been found in her unfinished gown, pearls stitched unevenly across the bodice, as if even death couldn't finish what love had destroyed. Hale looked at the broken thread in her hair and whispered, "She sewed her way to freedom, just not the kind she deserved." Nathan didn't cry when they arrested him. He didn't fight, didn't shout, just stared at the flashing lights as though they belonged to another world. "It wasn't supposed to end like this," he muttered, his voice calm and hollow. Hale watched him closely. There was no remorse, only disappointment that his perfect fantasy had unraveled. As the cuffs clicked shut, the fairy tale prince everyone once admired finally looked exactly like what he'd always been, a monster dressed in charm. Inside the interrogation room, Nathan spoke like an artist defending his masterpiece. "She wanted too much freedom," he said softly. "She kept changing the dress." Hale leaned forward, voice low but firm. "You killed her because you couldn't own her." Nathan smiled faintly. "I made her perfect." For the first time, Hale saw what Emily must have seen too late. The delusion, the worship, the sickness of a man who mistook possession for love. While Nathan's confession played in court, Maple Hollow held its breath. Margaret sat in the front row, clutching Emily's veil, tears tracing paths across her face. Claire couldn't look away. The words were chilling, Nathan describing each moment as if rehearsing vows. "She said she didn't love me anymore," he said, "so I stopped the wedding." The judge's gavel echoed through the room, sealing his fate. Life in prison. But no sentence could undo the cruelty of what he'd called love. That night, the news replayed Nathan's arrest footage again and again. But in Maple Hollow, it wasn't his face that haunted people. It was Emily's. Her smile on every flyer, her sketches in the boutique window, her gown now sealed in evidence. Detective Hale walked past the studio one last time and saw the faint reflection of a young woman at the window. "Just light. Just memory. You got your piece, kid," he whispered. Somewhere in that stillness, the story of Emily Carver finally stopped stitching itself to pain. The church bells rang on what was meant to be Emily's wedding day. Instead of flowers and laughter, there was silence, the kind that clings to air too heavy to breathe. Her coffin was carried down the same aisle she'd once walked with dreams of lace and promise. The dress she'd sewn for love now lay folded beside her, a shroud of innocence turned tragedy. Maple Hollow gathered in quiet disbelief, faces pale beneath candlelight. No one could speak her name without trembling. The fairy tale hadn't just ended. It had been rewritten in grief. Margaret spoke at the funeral with a voice that trembled but never broke. She believed in happy endings, she said. And maybe she found one, just not the one she imagined. Her words rippled through the congregation like prayer and warning combined. Hale stood in the back, hat in hand, remembering the quiet girl who sewed dreams into fabric. He wished he'd met her before the story turned dark, before love became a weapon. After the service, Claire visited Emily's studio one last time. Dust settled on the mannequin where the dress once hung. She ran her fingers over Emily's sketches, pages filled with dreams of love and lace. In the corner, she found a note Emily had written in faint pencil. "Every stitch is a promise. I hope mine will hold." Claire smiled through tears, realizing her best friend's story wouldn't end with death. It would live as a warning, a whisper to every woman who mistook control for devotion. Months later, Nathan's trial faded from headlines. The boutique closed, the house sold. But every year on Emily's birthday, Margaret placed a single white rose outside the old studio. Hale often joined her, silent, his hat resting over his heart. "You know," he said one morning, "she still makes people believe in love. Just the right kind now." Margaret nodded, eyes glistening. She always had that gift. The town never forgot her name, nor the dress she never got to wear. In the end, Maple Hollow spoke of Emily Carver, not as the girl who died, but as the woman who revealed what love should never become. Claire started a foundation for women escaping abusive relationships, naming it the Lace Promise. Margaret donated Emily's sketches, her laughter, her legacy. And though the world moved on, her story lingered like the soft hum of a song, half remembered. Because every thread she sewed, every dream she dared, became something larger than tragedy. A reminder that even broken fairy tales can teach the world how to heal.